Hello, I'm Reggie Key from ABC 7 News. Today we are interviewing the candidates for San Francisco mayor, and joining me to do so, San Franciscans themselves. We're starting off with Annie Gauss. She is senior news editor covering business and politics for the San Francisco Standard. And next to her is Kara Swisher, author, journalist, and host of the podcast On with Kara Swisher. We are asking the questions again of the top mayoral candidates, and joining us right now is Mayor London Breed. Mayor Breed, thanks so much for taking the time today.
Of course, happy to be here.
We're going to start with Kara Swisher.
Sure, absolutely. So, Mayor Breed, I've done many interviews with you during COVID, before that. San Francisco has an image problem still after all this time. It's better than it was, but it still exists. And it's not just because of Ron DeSantis, Fox News, and Elon Musk's inane rants on any given Tuesday. Progress has been made, but the city is still vastly underperforming. I'd love you to talk about this. Like, larceny thefts are higher than most cities in the United States. You've been here 6 years. What's your best argument why you deserve more time, and what do you regret not having done?
Well, I'm glad to be here to answer the questions, to provide a lot of the facts about what's actually happening in San Francisco. In fact, crime is lower than it's been in a decade. And one of the great things we have now that we didn't have before was 21st century technology. Never in the history of our police department were we able to use drones and cameras and other equipment, which has led to a remarkable change around crime. And more importantly, we have a district attorney, Brooke Jenkins, who I actually appointed, and we're all working together to help combat those issues, which is why we're continuing to see crime decline. But I do understand that if people don't feel safe, we of course have so much more work to do. And I also want to make it very clear, we are well on our way. And when I say well on our way, many larceny thefts overall are down, especially car break-ins. Just in June and July alone are down over 70% and 50% overall year to date this year. We're excited about the new numbers, the new data, but again, unless you feel it, we of course still have work to do, and I acknowledge that. And more importantly, as a major city, we know that crime will happen. But here's the biggest difference. When a crime is committed in the city, there is an arrest made after an investigation. Sometimes officers are right on the spot, and the technology has helped us to do that. And more importantly, our district attorney, she's charging people, and that wasn't happening before.
How do you get over the idea of it, though? The vibe, I guess. I hate to say that, but it really is that idea.
There's definitely, I know a vibe, mostly because of what happened coming out of the pandemic. And we had to build our capacity to combat it. And what is great about now is we're working for it. San Francisco didn't have to work for it before, with a publicist, with advertising, and more importantly, the people who are visiting it, saying, I don't know why San Francisco gets such a bad rep. It's great here. We're having a great experience here. Dreamforce just had an incredible experience here. Bay FC, the first Bay Area Women's Soccer League in the Bay Area, is betting on San Francisco and building their training facility and their offices here. We're seeing a lot of sports events come to San Francisco, a lot more conventions, a lot more tourists, and we've had to work on that. And it's just going to take time for
faster, though.
I think what I regret not doing faster is having the tools that we had to. I mean, the bureaucracy of San Francisco is complicated and challenging to work in. And so some of the things that I had to do in order to move this forward, I had to go to the voters. I had to go to the ballot. And I regret not having a board of supervisors in some instances that would approve these kinds of things that would help us get to a place like this faster. That's one of the most frustrating things about doing this job. We have a legislative branch, we have executive branch, but we also have bureaucracy. And I am deconstructing that bureaucracy, which is why we are in such a better position and why it is finally leading to the kinds of results that San Franciscans want to see and deserve to see.
Mayor, there's no question, when people ask me who are either out of town or I'm traveling, and I know you get this, we all get this, where they say, ooh, San Francisco, is everything okay over there? And I'll say, there's no question in the past 9 months, just as a resident living here, things are better. I'm not seeing as many encampments, for example, on the streets. What I am seeing, though, and I have to be honest with them, is when I drive into work on most days, there are sex workers that are on the street on my way in. I'll get to the corner on Market Street, and there are sometimes up to 100 people just standing around, presumably not just loitering, but also probably involved in some sort of drug trade. And that night, I'll get on Muni and on occasion am just screamed at by someone who's on the platform or on the train with me. And that's not an abnormal thing. That's something that happens with frequency. And I feel like I have to be honest about that when people ask me how San Francisco is. What can we do to change that reality that is true for so many of us?
Well, I think that some of that is changing. And more importantly, we are finally, we built the capacity to, for example, address open air drug dealing. And we are working with the Drug Enforcement Agency, the U.S. Attorney's Office, our federal partners, our state partners with the California Highway Patrol and the National Guard, but not with M16 rifles on the corner, and our local law enforcement agencies. And we are making arrests of drug dealers and drug users in order to get people into treatment. That has not happened before. This coordinated effort to combat fentanyl, for example, which is one of the biggest challenges that not only San Francisco faces, but other cities around this country have had to endure this issue. And San Francisco is the only place where we have a coordinated state, federal, and local law enforcement effort to combat it, along with a number of issues that we know continue to persist. We have a lot of the capacity. It is starting to work, especially mostly in the daytime. We're still experiencing some challenges in the evening time. But I think the biggest thing and what you've seen, and even places like the Standard, where people are saying they're finally accepting help because they're tired of being pushed from this place and someone disturbing them in the middle of whatever it is they're doing. We're making people on the streets uncomfortable so that the only option is to accept what we are offering in order to get them the help and the treatment that they need.
Do you have the officers to do that?
Right now, we are understaffed with the San Francisco Police Department. But I will say the good news is, I have good news because, again, while my opponents are saying that this is all it takes or this is what needs to be done, it is so much more complicated than that. The reason why the Police Officers Association only endorsed my candidacy for mayor is because I have worked to provide them with the tools and to change the department in a way so that they can focus on doing their jobs. We are seeing bigger classes, including one that is almost at a capacity that exists now. The next one will be at capacity next month when we announce that class. And we are finally seeing people from other law enforcement jurisdictions transferred to San Francisco. That wasn't happening before, but it took a lot of removing barriers, adding opportunities to ensure that our officers have the equipment, the support, and what they need to be successful at their jobs, which is why San Francisco has one of the lowest violent crime rates in the country and has one of the lowest crime rates we've seen in over a decade. It is trending in the right direction. There's definitely more that needs to be done, but in the next 2.5 years, based on my plan, we plan to be fully staffed in the department, which takes into account retirees and other things. The other thing we've done is alternatives to policing. Our street crisis response team for people struggling with mental illness. That's a non-law enforcement response. People who need wellness checks. We've taken that off the plate of our officers. We put out on the streets in our commercial corridors and downtown retired police officers who are ambassadors. So we built up the infrastructure to ensure that the work that needs to be done to protect the public is happening, and officers are definitely a part of that equation.
Annie?
Mayor Breed, one of the things that we hear a lot from our readers is San Francisco has a budget that is $15 billion. It's larger than some entire states. And yet it seems to be the case that basic services don't seem to work that well all the time. The Comptroller's Office publishes an annual survey that showed that street cleaning was rated a C, overall safety a C, police service a C+, and overall government performance was rated at a C. So the question is, why, in a city like San Francisco that has the resources that we have, why is it so difficult to provide these basic services, and what are you doing to fix that?
Yeah, and I think there's a little misperception about our budget because San Francisco, unlike any other city in the entire country, is a city and a county with its own airport, with its own healthcare and hospital system, with its own port, with its own water and sewage system. Those are things that are ran independently and don't necessarily involve resources that are directed at the kinds of services that you're talking about. So when you start picking that apart, as well as set-asides and all these other things, we're talking about a budget that's closer to the $5 billion, $6 billion range. And then there's a couple of other things that go into that too. But nevertheless, what we are doing to try and combat those issues is not only making sure that we invest the right resources in the needs of our city, but that we are also holding our own workforce accountable. And specifically with, I'll just use Muni as an example. Muni has had one of the highest approvals, customer satisfaction that it's had in over 20 years, because the buses have a new cleaning system. There are 11 cameras on every single car. We have made the system more efficient, so it's more reliable, it's more safe, and customers are starting to feel the difference. Does that mean everything is great with Muni? No, but it is so much better than it's been in a long time. And the point that I'm making is we are improving upon those city services. We are hiring nurses, we're hiring 911 dispatchers, we are creating academies that prepare people for those particular opportunities, and we are making sure that we're putting the right people in the right places to help combat those issues. And cleanliness is starting to improve all over the city. I'll be very honest, we have our certain neighborhoods because of sometimes the people that we have on the streets in the Tenderloin, South of Market, and the Mission, where we have to do more work above and beyond, but we are starting to see improvement, and I'm really excited about what that means for the future.
So one of the things, we're going to do sort of more of a lightning round. We only have a short time here about certain topics. I'm going to focus in on innovation because, of course, that's going to be a big deal. San Francisco is becoming the world's AI hub. It's something I focus in a lot. It goes through boom and bust cycles all the time, and we had a big boom going on with the internet cycle that happened here. A lot of companies then moved out. Meta, Google, Block have reduced their space in San Francisco. How do you recoup lost tax revenue and attract new businesses? And should the city be offering incentives to major employees to set up shop here? Just for people to understand, according to budget forecasts, the city's expenses outpace revenues over the next few years, bringing a total deficit of $1.3 billion, I think it is, by 2028. So talk a little bit about how you're going to get them back here. It's happening organically with AI, but how do you get and keep them to return on the same levels?
Well, a lot of it is incentives, but the other thing that I've heard from businesses time and time again is that taxes keep changing. It's not predictable. And it's not sustainable because San Francisco is the AI capital of the world, but many of those startups will start up in San Francisco and choose to go someplace else because all of a sudden the amount of money they have to pay to the city is not something they could do immediately when they're just getting started. So we have Proposition M on the ballot that's going to focus less on payroll and people and more on sales and really outcomes and be a more fair, equitable system that's reliable for companies. That's one of the things that we have to do. The other thing that we are doing is providing incentives. We are providing tax breaks, fee waivers, first year free for any new business that wants to open in San Francisco. We waive all the city fees. Vacant to Vibrant, we're as a partnership with property owners downtown specifically to allow businesses to move into their properties and open up. And we're getting rid of the bureaucracy in San Francisco. So usually we'll say you can only have retail here. You can only have office here. We're making it possible to do all of them in one footprint, including have a workspace downstairs at the bottom level of a building and a coffee shop, a co-working space like that, which could not exist before. So we're making it easier to get to yes in San Francisco and providing incentives for businesses. But it also isn't just about downtown. Businesses have spread out all over San Francisco, including Mission Bay, the Dog Patch, Pier 70, all these new areas of San Francisco that were closed for over 150 years to the public are now these brand new, exciting neighborhoods where OpenAI is located, where Visa's global headquarters is located. And so I think that we have to become a more user-friendly place for businesses and remove our barriers, and that's exactly what I'm doing to get to yes.
Do you expect downtown to ever return? Because I mean, Amazon just required its employees to be in 5 days a week. Should the city's employees be in 5 days a week?
Well, I would say definitely, and that's something that we have consistently tried to work on. Recruiting and retention in certain fields has been very difficult, but ultimately, downtown is not going to be what it was before the pandemic. It's going to be something better. It's going to be a 24/7 neighborhood with housing and office space, with retail and nightlife and fun. We have had one of the best summers that we've had since before the pandemic with Oktoberfest, with the rave, with nightlife and activation. We are excited about getting to yes and making it possible to do some incredible things in our downtown like never before.
There has been a lot of change over the past year. You just outlined much of it, and many San Franciscans have noticed. The question that I hear from people on the streets is, where was this energy prior to this year?
Well, because I have a lot of people running against me on the Board of Supervisors, they are now being a lot more helpful and getting to yes when they've said no to previous recommendations of these kinds of things. I mean, I was able to rezone the entire downtown. So if you want to convert any office to housing, that 2 to 3 year process is gone. When we tried to do that before, there was no support to make it happen, and I would have had to go to the ballot. So I think that this race has also gotten more people interested in being more helpful about delivering for people, because again, what I have dealt with over the entire time that I've been mayor is a lot of obstruction, a lot of challenges, and I'm not blaming the board, I'm just saying that there's been many
times. You kind of
times,
just did blame the board, but go ahead, fine.
Well, there's been many a times and many a people who are now happen to be running for mayor.
But what happens if you do win again?
Yeah.
And then you have to go, do you go back right to that cycle again with obstructionism?
Well, I hope that we don't, but here's the thing, just like technology, being able to use technology for the police officers, that came directly from officers to use drone surveillance and other things. I couldn't get the board to support it. I couldn't get the Police Officers Association, but the people of San Francisco supported it. And so using the ballot, which I prefer not to do, is something I've done. And that's really, we had to build this capacity. This is not a job that easily you could just say, I'm going to do this one thing and something is going to happen, or I'm going to build this bridge and something is going to happen. Politics, sadly, is a natural part of what happens in trying to make things happen or not happening in the city. And this is not a job for someone who's not experienced. This is not a job for someone who doesn't have the temperament in order to work with people and deal with these challenges and clearly articulate what they are and the ability to deliver. We have built this capacity. We have changed these laws. We have made these investments to get this city on the right path. It didn't just happen overnight. It took a lot of hard work and an understanding of what it means to go through a global pandemic, make adjustments when you don't necessarily have everything you need, and continue to push this city forward.
Okay, Annie, and then we have one last question.
Sure. Mayor Breed, your administration has gotten a lot more aggressive towards homeless encampments in recent months, compelling people into shelter when they don't want to go. But the data shows that we don't have enough shelter. I checked the wait list this weekend. There were over 200 people on the wait list. What is it going to take to build more shelter? How are you going to pay for it, and where should it go?
Annie, I just want to be very clear. We now have actually the tools we need. We didn't have the tools that we needed until the Supreme Court decision came about, and now we can enforce the law. No sleeping, no lying, no camping, whether we have a place for you to go or not. But we do try to lead with a place for you to go. There's no mayor in the history of the city that has increased shelter capacity like I have, over 70%. There is no other mayor in history who has increased the number of permanent supportive housing units by over 60%. So we always will need more. The biggest difference now and what we've been able to do to try and address this issue is by making sure we're implementing our Homeward Bound program, which is now called Journey Home. That is the first option before we get to shelter. We want to reconnect you with family or friends in whatever city it is that you came from, and we want to make sure that that's the first option, because I don't care what anyone else says, building shelter is expensive. We're sustaining what we have, and if we're going to build more, we got to be able to sustain it. We're facing major budget deficits, and more importantly, it is not easy to try and go in somebody's neighborhood and say, I want to build a shelter here, or I want to build affordable homes for families. It took a lot of work, and it took taking a lot of risk. I got a lot of pushback on the Embarcadero, but we made it happen. We made a difference in that neighborhood, and we're going to keep doing everything we can to really focus on housing and housing production. The goal is to make sure we're building in the entire city, all neighborhoods, in order to allow for a safe, affordable place for people to call home. And it keeps going back to everyone's making claims, everyone's saying what they want to do or what they're going to do, but I've actually done it, and we'll continue to make sure that it's sustained and that we're getting people off the streets and we're giving them not this option or that option, but the only option we have to take us up on our offer for shelter or a connection to home, wherever that might be.
Okay, last question. This race is likely to be determined by rank choice voting. What will you list as your number two? Who will you list as your number two on the ballot? And I would love you to be able to say something positive about that choice.
I cannot today. I'm sorry.
Oh. Really?
Listen, you know, that's a hard one. That's a hard one, Kara, because you know, the challenge I have. I know. I just say it's a hard one, mostly because you know, this is not a job for. I mean, it's dangerous to have someone be considered just because they have money and they have no experience, because this is a serious job.
Daniel Lurie.
This is
So
this
not
is
number two.
Definitely not number anything. This is not a place for on-the-job training. Would you get on the 737 with a pilot with no experience? I mean, how do you think Captain Sully landed that plane on the Hudson? This city could have an earthquake, fire, terrorist attack, you name it, at any given moment. We don't have the luxury in a major city like San Francisco for on-the-job training. It is dangerous, it is reckless, and my plan is to continue to lead this city and build up on the success we made. And it's hard to look at most of the candidates and think that they would be anyone that I would ever want to see serve as mayor of San Francisco.
Now, Aaron Peskin has a lot of experience.
Well, look, whether it's experience or whether it's temperament, those are things that need to be taken into consideration, because it does require hard decisions, and the people of San Francisco have to be your number one priority. And that's what has happened throughout my entire duration of running this city. So,
do you really think you would leave it blank? Are you going to leave it blank?
I haven't decided yet. But I definitely know there are people that I'm definitely not putting on my ballot.
And Kara, we actually do have more time.
Okay, go ahead.
So I feel like I need to ask you this question, because people have a covenant when they elect someone, I think, as mayor, where they need to know that that person isn't going to play with their money. And I think there is some disappointment about what happened with the Human Rights Commission and Cheryl Davis, who resigned, who was in charge of that, and in charge of the Dreamkeeper initiative, which I know is very important to you and close to you. And to see these accusations that she was funneling money to someone with whom she had a personal relationship, I think for people, there's something that doesn't feel good about that when you're a citizen who sees it. And you've spoken about this. You don't feel good about it either. I think the question is, how can we trust? Because this city is built on trusting that these nonprofits and that these organizations are going to do with our money what we say that, that we wanted to have done with it. So how can we trust that that's going to be done?
And I got to say, this is a hard one. And we have put in a lot of tools, whether it's the Controller's Office and our independent audits and the work we do to check VIN numbers, to check Social Security numbers, to look at conflicts, to do ethics training every single year. I mean, we have a lot of tools in place to prevent things like that, but things, unfortunately, are going to fall through the cracks. We have 34,000 employees, and whenever anything goes wrong, whether I hired them or not, I take full accountability for that. And what we have to do is make the adjustments, including, you know, what I had to do with Dreamkeeper. It was hard to, you know, ask for the resignation of the director. It was hard to freeze funding until we get to the bottom of every single dollar to ensure the integrity of the program and bring in, you know, the Controller's Office and all the folks necessary, because the goal is we have to ensure that this program is protected, but we also have to make sure the things that are problematic never happen again. And that is what I have done time and time again whenever we faced any kind of issue around public trust with any of our departments, with any of those leaders of the department. We've gone in, picked things apart, and exposed what we needed to, and made sure that we were honest and transparent with the public, and that's what I will continue to do. And this is going to take a lot of building back of trust, because this program has been extraordinary. And when I say extraordinary, home ownership opportunities, business opportunities, helping with programs that serve, you know, seriously at-risk youth, providing alternatives. I mean, you name it, a city EMT program to give kids growing up in San Francisco a chance to work in the fire department. It's done some incredible work. You know, so my goal is to continue to make sure we make those investments, but once we provide a full and thorough investigation and make it available to the public. It's what I've always done from day one. And then I want to also just say, there are a lot of great nonprofits out there doing a lot of great work. And when someone violates that trust, I mean, we've been able to get rid of, a lot of nonprofits from doing business with the city, which has ultimately saved the city $120 million because of their violation of public trust. So we have a lot of work to do on this issue because these things are so new and so raw. But my commitment is to, in every single instance, when I know about it, when I see it, when I catch it, is for us to make sure that we deal with it, not that it takes 10 years to deal with it. We have systems in place, so we are catching these things a lot sooner than we have in the past. And we don't want to deviate from the important work that needs to be done, but we know we got work to do to build back the public trust to address this issue.
Okay, can I ask one more quick question?
Sure.
If Kamala Harris wins in November, what's the first thing you would ask of her? You know her.
So I will say that the first thing I will ask of our Vice President, soon to be President of the United States, is for support around housing production. She's one of the first candidates for president that talks seriously about the need to build housing everywhere, because all roads lead to housing, whether it's journalists, whether it's people who work in the nightlife industry or people who work in our restaurants and various industries. The ability for people to live in the city and live in the Bay Area and afford to live here and get around using different modes of transportation safely and efficiently anytime is important. And that requires getting the kind of support we need from the federal government to be as aggressive as we can in building more housing. And now with our changes to state laws so that the obstruction can't get in the way, if it's the height and the whatever the laws say, you can build it without CEQA and the obstruction that tends to happen and tends to delay. We've seen affordable housing projects that used to take 10 years go from 1 year to a groundbreaking after identifying the property. It's already taking shape, and it's so exciting. And I look forward to our work to make San Francisco a more affordable place for people of different income levels.
We want to thank Mayor London Breed for taking the time to talk with us today. And for more information about where she stands and the other candidates stand on the issues facing San Francisco, please go to abc7news.com/sfmayor. Of course, check out the SF Standard and the podcast On with Kara Swisher. Thank you again, Mayor Breed.
Thank you.